blanketed by darkness. My daughter stares intently, transfixed by the thin line of daylight that seeps between the vertical gap of the bolted train door. After a moment of contemplation, she uses the stream of light to illuminate her hands while signing to me. Red. I lean on the cold steel to see through the small opening. The ache in my back is enough to warrant a muffled grunt. Outside, slowly moving mountains preside over feathered patches of grass that billow in the wind and seem to rush by our train. Angular streaks, the afterimage of a red barn, fade into what little distance the gap allows, and I turn to my daughter and sign. Horse? The most beautiful sound in the world builds in her body like a piece of music slowly working toward a crescendo. Her shoulders rock back and forth. A smile flashes. Hands shake excitedly as if trying to coax the music out. To the untrained ear, it may sound like she's doing nothing more than expelling a joyous breath. She punctuates this remarkable sound by playfully hitting my arm and signing, "No." I pretend to be deep in thought. And after a moment, I raise both of my hands a little above my forehead in a measured motion from left to right. Cloud? She vigorously shakes her head. I take my left hand and place it in the air as though it were the ground, but am interrupted by the strong nudge of a foot from my wife, Sarah.
Nolan, what are you doing? Switch with me.
My daughter looks at me with concern, but I place both of my thumbs together near my sternum and arc them in a downward motion. Keep going. My body, feeling like it's been overtaken by rust, doesn't want to move the way it's intended to, and I collide with another occupant in the darkness who is quick to shove me back. "Pardon," I say. All I get is a grumble in return. We sway on the edges of a delicate dance. Half of us stand until our joints fuse together, then we tag someone seated to take our place. What started as an idea born from compassion has more recently devolved into arguments and physical confrontation. What little air there is to breathe is polluted by the foul stench of urine and excrement. How long has it been since we stopped at the border? 2 days? 3? The thirst has become unbearable. When we do stop, they bring us food and drink and watch in amusement as we fight over the scraps. We beg them to allow us to relieve ourselves and give us 5 minutes of sunshine and fresh air. They never say a word. They simply bolt the door and leave us with the soft glow through the crack. It has become as secret as the sun to us. It's our only way of telling time. Light to darkness, to light, to darkness, to light. This pattern repeats until when? Until they finally starve us to death? Until we kill each other? Until they kill us? For season's sake. I watch as my daughter grabs some of the hay scattered across the floor and plays with it. Like most children her age, she makes games of everything, even in the direst circumstances. I feel a pang of guilt for lying to her. She thinks we're traveling to a new home, and that all of the people stuffed in this cattle car will be our neighbors. But how do you explain this to a child? Imprisonment? Invasion? What are these to my daughter? There are no words for it. If you listen close enough, the train has a certain rhythm to it, a steady hum mixed with the soft vibration of voices. It reminds me of the soft crackle the fireplace made while I toiled in the workshop at home. When my biggest worries were running out of soling nails, or agreeing on whose turn it was to sign bedtime stories for Emily. I can almost convince myself that it's safe to sleep, but instead, I'm content to exist in that place between reality and dreams, letting my memory run wild. Despite the wretched train car, the memory seems so vivid. I'm hammering the sole of a boot near the firelight. Brown strands of hair touch the edge of my vision as my wife wraps her arms around me and whispers,
Enough work, Nolan.
I put down the hammer, stand and stretch my back. There are little taps behind me. I turn suddenly to try and catch my daughter off guard, but she's not startled. She coaxes me to chase her and does her best impression of a laugh. Spit catches the side of my face, and I'm jolted from my reverie by a man screaming at the top of his lungs.
I heard it! I heard the knock! Did you hear it? They're alive, and they're knocking!
He began to lose his mind on the first day of our journey. To his misfortune, it has been a slow descent into madness. His wife and son were separated from him when the Caligans rounded us up at Mustang Prairie. He spent the entire first day sobbing. At first, others tried to calm him, saying things like, "You'll see them again," or "They're just a car over. We'll stop in a few days." But we didn't stop, and so his yelling began. Every single day he screams at the top of his lungs when his terror overtakes him.
Can you hear me, Dansby? Jessica! Can you hear me? Pound the walls, if you can!
He only recently started to imagine the knocks. No one else ever hears them.
Keep him quiet.
Someone in the rear of the car shouts.
He's not the only one who's lost family here.
The man continues his ravings. The timing is odd. Usually he waits until the minuscule beam of light disappears before he starts hollering. He's getting worse. The lack of air, the darkness, the heat, the stench, the thirst. They're suffocating us all. My mother used to say that we need those who love us and whom we love to give our lives meaning. Yet I've watched more men go insane this last week despite being surrounded by those loved ones. Despite this, hope endures. Some evenings, as I hold my daughter close and wait for her to fall asleep, I'll listen to the people around us as they hum childhood ballads, recite their favorite poems, or offer prayers to the divine. An unspoken agreement exists so that order is maintained. When these performers take the stage, no one interrupts. Instead, we simply wait to be captivated, to be momentarily transported out of the horrid train car and back to simpler times and happier memories. These hidden performances fade when daylight arrives, and I can never find the performers to thank them for that momentary reprieve. Instead, the morning brings back the minuscule beam of light, along with the worry and dread that corrupt us all. I'm so lost in thought that I almost don't feel the tug on the bottom of my shirt. Two erect hands, mimicking roofs, meet at the fingertips and move from right to left, touching twice, and I look at my wife for confirmation and receive a nod. My daughter, not missing a beat, pushes back through the crowd to her. My first reaction is to run to the gap and gain confirmation myself, but instead, I reach down, moving some hay out of the way, and touch the floor of the car. Sometimes I can tell if the train is coming to a stop simply by feeling the trembling beneath my feet. Before I have enough time to make any determination, a shrill whistle pierces the air, then is cut off suddenly. Silence overtakes the car, and for the first time all day, I'm truly allowed to hear. This new symphony of sounds is musical in its own way, my heart popping in my ears, worried breaths attached to worried men and women, a tendon hopping that hasn't been used in days. No one wants to make the first move, and the result is a moment that stretches longer than it should. It isn't until we hear the muffled voices directly outside our cattle car that the frenzy begins. I pull my wife and daughter close and move them away from the door. I learned a long time ago that shortcuts get you nowhere. What little space existed before disappears entirely as people surge toward our position. My wife and I both try to embrace for the inevitability of the mob, but the effort is akin to trying to swim upstream during the spring melt. As children, we learned that one is always better off going with the current than against it. We end up pinned to a wall. My wife yells,
Nolan! Emily can't breathe!
A glance down tells me the opposite, but to make sure I use tapping as a sign to say, "It's all right. We're going to be all right." She gently taps back, acknowledging my message.
Let us out!
A man in the horde screams at the door. This inspires those around him to follow suit, and in a matter of seconds, they rapidly evolve to banging.
We've been in here for days!
Bang!
We need food, medicine! There are sick people in here!
Bang!
Please, for the love of Mother Spring, just let us out of here!
Bang, 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 bang! Those pounding away pay for it. The door finally flies open and their eyes betray them to the harsh light of day. With dozens shielding their eyes, I sense an opportunity to claim more space for my family. Using my forearm, I push on the couple nearest to us to create distance, but I am startled by the cries of a victim who is cracked in the head by something.
Attention.
A voice set against the blinding light says with commanding authority,
You are now considered conscripts of the Republic of Calico. You will be marked and processed. You are to turn over any valuables and travel documents upon exiting the train. Any valuables found hidden on your person will result in your immediate death. Get in line and follow the rules. And you just might earn back your freedom.
There is a brief pause as the whole of the car registers what has been said.
Now, I want an orderly exit. Form a line. Run, and we will shoot.
Rough hands and bayonets force us out of the car and onto a platform. A vacant track across the way is overshadowed by far-off mountains rimmed with what look to be pine trees. We seem to be on the edges of a city within Calican borders. An aged, ivory-colored stone rampart, partially obscured by our train, sits behind us. There are hundreds of people disembarking from a dozen cars all along the line of the train yard. Each person emerges, blinks rapidly at the first light they've experienced in days, and hops down onto the gravel. A Calican guard stands every few fathoms, guns held at the ready. They are lined up like fence posts, dressed identically with light gray trousers and navy jackets. They nudge and prod us towards some distant goal, their rifles pointed skyward.
Where are we?
A woman's voice permeates the air in a panic.
Give us the name of this place.
There's no time to even listen for a response before we are swallowed by a throng of thousands packed together so tightly that I feel a constant pressure in my chest. I am propelled from every side toward the front of the train, and yet more unfortunate souls join our retinue with each moment. Every time we pass a new cattle car, I'm reminded of a kicked anthill with an endless stream of ants pouring out to join the procession. I grab Emily's and Sarah's hands. We are temporarily relieved of some pressure when an old man in front of us trips and is trampled. The sounds and confusion are loud enough that his screams can't be heard. What must Emily be feeling? With only 4 senses to draw from, is the horror of this experience somehow lessened? Does she even understand what's happening? I peek toward her and immediately realize my folly. She's terrified. Tears stream down her pallid face, and why wouldn't she be? She views the world from my hip. Everything must look larger to her. What I perceive as maybe 1,000 souls herded together, she perceives as millions. A pair of Calican soldiers, each with a snarling, snapping dog on a leash, approaches, and the throng parts.
2 lines.
One of the dog-wielding soldiers says,
Men to this side, women and children to this side.
He delivers these lines unperturbed as if he has recited them 100 different times.
We will not let them separate us.
Sarah hisses, then tightens her grip on my hand. I stare with incredulity as a man throws himself to the feet of the approaching soldiers, pleading,
Please let my son come with me. He's just a child. My wife is gone.
The way he suddenly falls to the ground frightens the dogs. With tails wagging and hackles raised, they snap at the man, who jerks back in response. Reining in his dogs, one of the soldiers glares at the man and reiterates the instruction.
Men to this side, women and children to this side.
I spy the top of a distant chimney puffing smoke behind our train, and upon further inspection notice the checkerboard pattern of buildings and streets. Where is this? Where have the Calicans taken us?
Nolan, are you listening to me?
I'm in shock. My tongue feels fat in my dry mouth, and I choke on my words, unable to respond. A short distance ahead, there are a little over a dozen soldiers with repeating rifles who are flanked by a woman on horseback. She whittles away at a piece of wood, shaping it to look like a bird. The horsewoman is dressed differently than the soldiers. Her gray pants are tucked neatly into nearly knee-high riding boots, the shade of black butcher paper. Her white shirt is striking against the backdrop of despair. A flash of gentle purity, but a stark contrast to the night-black lavalier around her neck. But really, it's her grip that gives her a frightening look. She grasps her wooden project with licorice-colored gloves and furrows her brow in concentration. I wonder if the little piece of wood will snap in her hand. Behind the horsewoman, a mass of soldiers. I spy a crossroads where our fellow conscripts are divided. One path veers into the city, where all the women and the young are being marched. The other line continues forward, toward another train sitting parallel to ours. Men are being forced into it, and it's upon seeing this that fear prompts a hard question I've been trying to avoid. How am I going to keep my family together?
Nolan, you aren't listening.
My wife snaps, but I don't want to say anything until I know what to say, until I'm struck with a brilliant idea. It's going to come. It must. Something that will take my family and I to safety. A sudden pull at my left hand makes me realize my daughter wants me to let her go. I sternly shake my head no, but she uses her one free hand to attempt to communicate. It starts at her belly button and gestures upward and then outward. Separate? I realize that I am one of the only men standing in a line full of women and children. How is this even real? How can a place like this even exist? Families are being stripped from one another? Why hadn't anyone warned us? My legs are shaking. I'm shoved from behind, and all I smell is a rancid odor coming from an angry voice.
You're going to get us all killed,
says a weathered-looking woman driven by the fury of the situation. But before I can respond, my wife holds up a finger to her and looks at me.
You're not leaving us, Nolan.
But the realization has always been there deep inside. From the moment they stuffed us in the train. This was always going to be our destination. Maybe she's right. I can't put you or Emily at risk. I feel my heart rendering as I say the words. They feel like a betrayal.
Nolan, you're not leaving us. Do you understand me? You're not.
This incites a rage within the woman behind us.
If he doesn't leave,
She says defiantly.
I'm going to call the guard. Shut your mouth, you old hag.
My wife is all too happy to meet this threat with rage of her own.
And mind your own business.
My daughter, with years of experience picking up on my wife's mannerisms, notices that something is amiss. Her eyes dart between her mother and me. I try to calm her by signing, "It's all right." It doesn't work. The haggard woman is on the cusp of yelling for the guard when an even louder voice at the head of the line takes precedence.
I won't let you take them.
A man screams at a young-looking soldier.
You can't tear us apart. You'll have to shoot me, you bastard.
Behind him stands what I assume to be his wife, who cradles a boy on the precipice of tears with his arms wrung tightly around his mother's chest. The woman slowly strokes the boy's chestnut hair, but I can't be sure who is comforting whom. The soldier responds to the man's harassment by menacingly raising his repeating rifle into a firing position. But this just antagonizes the distressed father, who in turn urges the procession of ragged bodies to attack the armed guards.
We can take them. We outnumber them.
He shouts.
Let the world learn of Calico and how they treat those they conquer. They can't kill us all, come on!
The argument draws the attention of the dozen soldiers populating the area, and they set about raising their rifles to their shoulders. Some point them at the man causing the commotion, others point them at my family and me. Across the open area, the horsewoman hasn't even looked up from her carving. The crowd recoils, anticipating a shot, and there's a moment where I find myself caught between the dread of too many people. Those at the front of the line push backward to distance themselves from the troublemaker. Those at the back push forward, unaware of the violence that awaits them. The man at the center of the conflagration continues his desperate hollering. One of the soldiers, a lean man with sunken eyes, brings the muzzle of his rifle to touch the man's chest. The father's reaction is immediate. Using his straightened hand, the father swats the rifle away, and in the same motion grasps the barrel of the weapon. He pivots his left leg between the soldier's groin and kicks upward. The Calican falls to his knees and lets out a yelp as his weapon is removed. Not missing a beat, the man straddles the Calican and rains down aggressive blows with the butt of the rifle. Yet it isn't the sound of pummeling that catches my ear, but rather the subtle jingle of spurs behind us. I realize the horsewoman is absent from her horse. Seemingly appearing out of the shadows, she grabs the collar of the man and tosses him aside with ease. The motion is so sudden, fluid, and effortless that even the Calican soldiers flinch in response. It doesn't seem possible. She moves so quickly that not even her own men were aware of her presence until after she had disarmed the threat. The woman approaches the stunned prisoner, places a knee on his neck, and holds his right arm between her legs. A pathetic gurgle fills the air.
Remove his weapon.
She calmly commands the soldiers. More silence.
Now.
The stern word serves as a starting point for time to begin again, and the Calican soldiers rush to do as they're told. The young soldier, the original owner of the repeater, pushes himself off the ground, eyes dark with hatred. It looks like someone had rearranged his nose sideways. The Calican painfully looks about for his weapon, and finding it in the hands of a peer, snatches it away with a curse. He shuffles over to where the horsewoman has the father pinned to the ground, stumbling a few times, and aims his rifle at the man's exposed head. The bark of the shot echoes in the sky. A red dot appears in the prisoner's forehead. A howl of outrage and pain pierces my ears, and I witness both the murdered man's wife and boy fall to the ground, overcome with grief. The sound is so primal that all who hear it instantly know it for what it is.
Shut them up.
The Calican is pointing at the pair to emphasize his meaning, but no one moves. All are still cautiously eyeing the horsewoman. Her knee remains at the neck of the dead man. Did she even flinch at the sound of the rifle crack? I see a blur of movement, obsidian-colored flashes of a glove wrapping around the Calican's throat. The horsewoman lifts him a few feet into the air and effortlessly slams him into the dirt. Somewhere at the end of the motion, she had drawn a knife and now holds it to the man's neck.
I did not order you to do that!
She growls. The Calican struggles to get free, but she just pushes the knife down harder on his throat and applies more pressure.
Have mercy.
The Calican manages.
That option was taken from you when you shot him.
She points to the body with her free hand. The Calican's eyes widen. like he's found some truth new to the world. The woman takes her free hand and applies more pressure on the blade. She grits her teeth, and I watch as the Calican's legs flail. The knife cuts him deeper than he's probably ever been cut before.
Cass.
A new shout pierces the air. A man with the same livery, black gloves, and steel-toed knee-high boots rides toward us atop a chestnut mare, stopping just short of the horsewoman. His voice is raspier than you would expect from someone his age, but there's a clear familiarity between the two as he sits forward in his saddle.
What's all this?
He gestures broadly toward the scene. She relieves the pressure of the knife on the Calican's throat, and somehow, against all odds, I realize he's still alive.
Well,
Urges the new rider.
I'm waiting for an explanation.
The horsewoman begins to stand, but digs her boot heel into the down soldier's hand. A loud crunch can be heard as she ascends.
Ah, you fucking bitch!
She pays the insult no mind and turns to answer the new rider's question.
The usual military incompetence.
She grunts, clicking her blade back into its sheath. The Calican scrambles backward, awkwardly. He can't decide whether to clutch his throat or cradle his broken hand. He looks like some sort of creature you would encounter in a children's story that warns not to make a deal with the troll underneath a bridge. Crooked nose, broken hand, bloody throat. A soldier nearby tears a rag off the back of his foraging cap and moves to place it on the Calican's neck.
We've been summoned.
The new rider says to the horsewoman.
The big man wants a word with us.
The horsewoman stalks back toward the prey. She stares at the downed soldier and allows the moment to stretch. She's like a snake, hypnotizing its kill. The Calican can't do anything but clench his teeth and tremble. Blood continues to leak from his face and neck, dripping to the ground. The compress he was given is now painted crimson. When it seems like the moment can't go on any longer, she pierces it by whistling. Her horse trots over. It must be at least 16 hands tall and served her purpose if she meant to intimidate the man. She grabs its reins without looking behind.
I've memorized your face, the way you stand, the way you cower. Pray you do not cross me again.
And with that, she mounts her horse and gallops away alongside the other rider. Doesn't take long for the line to start moving again. I look at my wife, wanting to drink in what I believe will be our last moments together, but she's occupied, trying to calm Emily. My daughter points to the body of the murdered man and holds her left hand flat, gently tapping it with her right index finger. She seamlessly transitions this into a motion where she turns both of her index fingers like a screw and then claps her chest with a flattened hand. Will this happen to me? No, baby bear. My wife signs back, shaking her head worriedly. Your father and I won't allow that to happen. She picks Emily up in the way only a mother can and looks to me expectantly. But before I have a chance to fill the silence, the putrid odor of the old woman's breath behind me fills my nostrils.
Guard! Another one! Here! Come here!
She calls, viciously pointing at me, her index finger jabbing through the air like a meaty pike. Blunt pain at the back of my knees makes me see white. I'm shoved to the ground as my arms are restrained. The filth below rushes up at me as my head smashes into it. Dirt finds its way into my right eye and the canyons of my face. I feel the weight of a gun muzzle pressed against my back. In mere seconds, 2 more Calican soldiers rush to their comrades' sides, pinning me to the ground. They kick up dust as they run, and I wonder if this will be my last image in life. My wife and daughter being dragged away through the dirt.
Nolan!
I hear my wife scream my name. Her cry is animalistic and brutal. From the corner of my ruined vision, I become aware of 2 little feet running towards me. Emily, no! A soldier clubs my daughter in the gut with the stock of his rifle, and she hits the ground in an unnatural way. She rolls around, hands grabbing at air that doesn't come. I sob in the dirt. The sound that escapes my throat is wet and piteous. The names of my daughter and wife are made unrecognizable by blind fury and bottomless grief. Around us, the separation continues. Hundreds of pairs of feet pass us by, and I feel angry that no one offers us assistance. A fifth soldier approaches.
Enough. We are already behind schedule, and I don't want more bodies to clean up today.
He was in the wrong line, sir. He could be a threat.
A young voice responds. The fourth soldier takes a moment to look me over and then approaches. A boot presses down fiercely on my back, and I feel him tug upward on my pants.
Does this look like a man willing to rebel to you?
I realize I've pissed myself. Slowly, I feel the pressure of the muzzle on my back dissipate. Freed, I crawl on bloodied hands and knees toward my daughter, who is now too frightened to move. I point toward my chest, gesture both of my hands in quick horizontal chopping motions, and transition that into pointing my right index finger toward my eye and then back to my daughter. I'll come for you. With Emily, it's her hands, the way she effortlessly moves them from one side to the next, that are the windows to her heart. It's always been her hands. I feel at times watching her that I am witnessing perfection, so it becomes alarming when that moment of perfection becomes infected with sorrow, and she signs, "Don't leave me, Daddy." My collar is suddenly tugged, and I'm pulled away from Emily at the same time my wife arrives to collect my beautiful little girl. I look to the soldier responsible for our predicament and realize he's barely more than a boy, maybe 16 or 17. "Please, please," I'm reduced to begging. "Just let me say goodbye." Frustration wears on his face, and there's a moment where I think I've made a mistake in asking for this kindness. To my surprise, he allows it.
Make it quick.
He half turns. It's the biggest gesture of civility I have been allowed since capture. There are no words that can express all that I want to say. It dawns on me that this might be the last moment I see either of them. This might be their last memory of me. I pull them into a hug and kiss both of their heads. I can feel their spirits break, realizing the inevitability of our separation. The initiation of my kiss is what does it. I am the first to acknowledge that all hope is gone, and like domino tiles, their willpower folds. I reach into my pocket and pull out a handkerchief. It's embroidered with the emerald initials of my cobbler shop, CB. It isn't much, but maybe when times grow dark, they can look at this and find some solace. I press it into my daughter's hands and watch as she caresses the embroidered letters. With my left thumb, I touch my forehead and bring it down to connect it with my right thumb. I point at myself. To help you find me again. I continue to sign so the Calican boy that watches me won't understand. I'm going to find you. I pour into both of their eyes, ensuring they see my conviction. No matter how long it takes, no matter where you are, I'll find you and I'll take you someplace safe. The young soldier has had enough and interrupts the moment by snatching the handkerchief out of my daughter's hands to inspect it. She grabs for it, but he just pushes her to the ground like a hound quashing a young puppy who doesn't yet know its boundaries. It upsets me in a way I can't quite put to words, and this anger must show on my face, for the young soldier, with a look of contempt, throws the handkerchief to the ground and advances on me. The first blow of his rifle across my forehead hurts less than I was expecting it to. The second, third, and fourth blows are where the pain truly begins. By the fifth, I drift into darkness. There's nothing but peace as I sway back and forth. I'm in the saddle of a horse. The wind parts for us as we thunder past farmhands working the field. The horse is eager to go faster, but I must rein him in for fear of Emily losing her grip on my midsection. I become lost to the moment and the rhythm of the gallop. I feel like I am a child on a great oak bow, being rocked gently by Mother Spring's gentle breezes. Slightly forward, slightly backward. The glimmer of the lake shimmers on the horizon to the north. I promised Emily that so long as she finished her chores, she could swim with the other children. When the lake finally pierces my vision, I turn, expecting her to grace me with a smile. But she's gone. All I feel is agony pressing on me from every direction. A cruel claustrophobia. Nameless suffering in the pit of my stomach. I awaken to a scream. A rough hand covers my mouth.
You're all right.
A voice says to me in the darkness. The screaming abruptly stops. There's a wetness behind my ears, and I realize I'm bleeding. It feels like someone is repeatedly stabbing me in the eye. The source of my pain exists on the right side of my forehead. I can't see the gash, but it's like my heart pumps blood just to leak it out. The rumbling seesaw of movement feels familiar. I'm on a train. Again. There's more light this time as it seeps through boards not properly laid into the walls. It's like the light pierces my very skull. As it flickers through the boards, so too does it seem to flicker through my head. I can't tell if the train is passing something or if my vision is that badly damaged. The energy it takes just to assess my surroundings drains me. With every rattling clack, I move farther away from my heart. Emily, Sarah, where are you? What city were we in? My eyes close and I take solace in the blackness that comes before I drift to that deeper place, where torment can't affect me. A painless utopia. It does not happen suddenly. Rather, it's like the tide, a gradual onset so minuscule that even if I tried to pay attention, I'd miss it. I do not dream. There's nothing to dream of. No memory, no worries, no pain, no existence. Just the comfort of the void. The primal sound of hammering coaxes me from my consolation. There are other sounds blended in the background, but as far as I'm concerned, they're just noise lacking the definitive clang of the hammer. My mind focuses on the notes, as if I can see the sparks created the moment it strikes its quarry. The pounding of my head springs forth with each new clang, and the rest of my body slowly comes to life. I'm standing. No, I'm being held up by a man whose grip provides strength my legs cannot. We're moving again, but not on the train. He's holding me up, and we're walking in rocky dirt. I stare at the man, trying to adjust my eyes, and I can tell he's saying something to me, but his voice just blends into the sounds. All I hear is the sledgehammer. 1 turns to 2, 2 to 3, then dozens. They sound different. Some fall hard while others fall soft. You can hear the contrast in the notes they make. Where are they? I try to speak out loud. Instead, all that my lungs can suffice is a breathy sound that no human would be able to make sense of. The man who holds me gently starts to shake me. I can tell he's trying to get me to pay attention, but I do not understand his words. That's when I see them. Nearer to the horizon than me, hundreds of men working on an unfinished railroad that snakes between rounded yellow-green hills. Some men lift sledgehammers over their heads and strike downward with force. Others use shovels to pack dirt in the necessary spots. They're all dressed the same, plain white shirts with beige, muddy pants. Calican guards sit atop horses to watch their progress, like vultures after a host of soon-to-be carcasses.
I can't keep holding you up forever,
a voice says to me. I must be in a nightmare. Once again I stand in the heart of a line packed with probably 100 souls. All look to be men. The line snakes through the entrance of a crumbled city freshly bombed with cannons. What's left of the curtain walls fills me with a certain sadness. They look to hearken back to the ancient times of Ghent, remnants that somehow remained untouched for thousands of years. But before I am able to adjust my eyes, the man who holds me suddenly lets me go, and like a waterfall, I collapse.
Seasons, damn it.
He says with an annoyed tint to his voice. I try to stand, but my feet disobey me. It's not that they don't work, they're just slower than I'm accustomed to, spurred on by a disconnect between my mind and my body. I can feel those in line behind me closing in. Growing tired of the charade, the man helps me up.
I swear if they shoot me because I'm helping you.
Yet his actions contradict his words, as he is kind enough to lend me his shoulder for stability. I'm about to thank him, but a greater fear takes precedence. Sarah. Emily. What's the name of the city we just came from? I try to gesture to the train, but again my words come out broken, and the question flows past him. With my vision almost back to normal, I see that he's an older gentleman with green eyes. He's almost completely bald, the only remaining remnant of gray hair sprouting from the sides of his head. Where am I? His brow furrows in concentration as he listens intently to my question.
The front,
he says, looking around, clearly worried to be talking to me. What? What front? The city. What was the name of the city where they split us from our families? Frustration creeps into his features, giving him the look of a weathered father tired of being asked the same question by a child.
I don't know. I just saw you were going to be left behind on the train, so I grabbed you. If you can't get off the train, they just shoot you.
I'm about to ask another question, but he continues.
Look, the best thing you can do right now is shut your mouth, open your ears, and keep your eyes straight ahead.
We've made it into the broken teeth of the fallen city, and I see that it's not just buildings that have been bombed out, but people as well. Men wearing white shirts move hurriedly throughout the skeleton of the city, working together to pick up fallen bodies underneath the rubble from the bombardment. A pair closest to us lift a vacant-eyed woman not much older than my wife. As they carry her past, I can't help but look into her lifeless gaze. It's like someone took away the thing that made her human and replaced it with emptiness. The burden of the body proves to be too heavy, and one of them accidentally drops her near a group of Calican soldiers who sit smoking and drinking coffee.
You spilled my coffee, prisoner. You know what that's going to cost you.
One of the soldiers stands, hand reaching for his bayoneted gun. These soldiers are different from the ones that I saw in the city where my family was taken. Whereas the ones we saw previously wore fresh uniforms of bright colors, these wear near identical blue and gray garb, save their foraging caps, which they have swapped with helmets. Most of their helmets have been poked and dented by bullet holes. The men with the white shirts find themselves on their knees, begging for forgiveness. I'm unable to catch the end of the exchange because we continue our trek through the destitute city. The line does not follow a road. Rather, there is no road that can be seen. It has been completely blanketed with shattered pieces of wood and brick. About every 10 fathoms, a group of soldiers sits together. 2 usually, sometimes 3. Some try to sleep, while others drape blankets over their shoulders, rifles peeking out. A sharp pop echoes in the sky, and the progress of our line is immediately stalled. I follow my gray-haired savior's eyes back to where the white-shirted prisoner dropped the body, and realize he's been executed.
Keep moving.
A soldier who oversees our line hollers at us.
You need to walk on your own now, lad,
says my savior. His face is showing signs he's clearly strained from my weight. To my surprise, I find that I am able to stand on my own now, though the man who has been helping me hovers behind me like a shadow in case I can't make it. Each step hurts, like I have glass wedged between my toes.
What's your name?
I ask my savior.
Caleb.
My wife, I manage, and my daughter. This line of inquiry irks Caleb.
Stop,
He hisses.
Don't draw attention to yourself. And if you must, do me the kindness of not drawing attention to me.
Someone must know where they are. I need to think. There needs to be some identifying landmark that I can use to help jog my captured countrymen's memories. But all I can remember is the look on my daughter's face as the handkerchief I gave her was snatched from her hands. Think. Damn it. I need to think. That woman. That disgusting old woman who screamed to the guards. This is her fault. I hope they kill her. I feel shame. The thought is hollow. Panic sets in. I tremble and become acutely aware of my heartbeat. Why didn't I pay better attention to the city? A hand grasps my shoulder.
The only thing you need to worry about right now,
Caleb says.
is standing on your own 2 feet.
I look down and realize I'm barefoot. What happened to my boots? I take a quick look around and recognize that I'm the only person in line without any type of footwear. Someone stole them. My initial reaction is to scan Caleb, but he holds nothing in his hands. His own shoes are shoddy and full of holes. What looks to be a Calican officer shouts orders to us as we approach a very large brick building that's still somehow intact.
When you get inside, strip off your clothing. Hold on only to your shoes.
For the first time since regaining consciousness, I get an up-close look at the conscripts in the white shirts, the ones not marching in our line. Something is odd about them. Each of them bears a mark on a different part of his body, though I am unable to get a good look. They work with the Calicans to usher us into the building. There's a certain weariness to their actions. They won't make eye contact with us and instead focus on whatever task to which they have been set. As we come closer and closer to the building, I notice that the men in our line are removing their clothes before entering. The clothes are tossed into 2 piles at the base of the building. New jackets, sweaters, and pants in one pile, and old garments that look like rags in the other. The end is the same for us all. Nakedness. Doing my best to not feel ashamed, I shiver, both from the beginnings of Brother Autumn's chill and from the fear of what awaits in the building. Some choose to wear their shoes while meeting their fates, while others prefer to hold them in hand. Upon entering the building, we become enveloped by darkness. Not true darkness, but it still shocks me when contrasted with the light outside. My eyes adjust, and the candlelight from lanterns in the building reveals a long corridor. Yet, where I expect there to be dozens of doors, there are none, save the one at the end of the hall. Silence pervades, and my feet feel a cold slab beneath my toes. I bite my lips so that my teeth stop chattering. Is that what's happening here? Are the Calicans leading us to our deaths? It's amazing to me that none of us even thinks to rebel when it seems like our lives might end. We come into this world bare, and it seems the Calicans might make us leave it that way. 40 more steps. I'm now close enough to see the door at the end of the corridor swing open. Each time it does, a soft hissing sound escapes, along with a man's scream, and tendrils of smoke are illuminated by the light within. Then 2 pairs of Calican hands appear from either side of the doorway, grab the next victim, and yank him into the room before the door slams shut. The whole thing brings to mind some great behemoth swallowing us man by man. 30 more steps. The door swings open again to claim its next victim. I hear a scream, accentuated by the shrill sound of wheezing. 20 more steps. Another scream. I study the next man due to go through the breach and notice he holds a pair of boots in his right hand, and another pair of boots strung together by the laces are slung over his shoulder. My boots. Swanson's. Made by my own 2 hands. I could never mistake them for someone else's. Anger rises within me. I'm moving toward him before I even realize what's happening. It's like my feet are moving on their own accord, even though my mind is telling them to stop. Stripped men stare at me as I grunt past like some wounded soldier making his last stand, and eventually I make it to the thief. I move to grab my boots from his shoulder, but before I make contact, the door flies open and a charcoal odor causes me to recoil. I watch as 2 Calican soldiers steal my prize from me. As they drag the thief into the room, the door swings back and forth like a pendulum, each open swing hinting less and less what awaits inside. Every fiber of my being tells me to retreat from this place, and I slowly back away. What was I thinking? Why didn't I have this kind of courage when it mattered most? A memory of the man with the hole in his head is summoned, and I realize that courage isn't an asset. It's better not to stand out, like Caleb said. The man behind me pushes me after I accidentally collide with him. Another scream. I'm next. I'm at the front of the line. Once again, the door swings open and the 2 Calican soldiers grab me by the arms. They are opposites of one another. One is clean-shaven and dark-skinned. The other is fair and sports the onset of a bright red beard. The movement happens so quickly that I am almost unable to process it. My natural reaction is to dig my feet into the ground, to use my heels as anchors so that I can fight against my fate, but the strength of these men is remarkable. They drag me from the dark of the corridor to the light of the room, and my senses are overwhelmed. The hissing is there, and I can feel the warmth of a fire on my face. A third figure stands with his back to me, and before he can turn to reveal his face, the other 2 slam my head onto a table, holding my wrists still at my sides.
What you reckon happened to his face?
The bearded one remarks.
Don't know. Poor riches. Makes you wonder why they don't just have us kill them.
The clean-shaven one responds.
I doubt this one makes it past a few weeks.
The third figure moves over to what looks to be a large barrel of water and pulls a black branding iron from inside. I recognize the symbol at the end of the iron. Everyone in Seneca would. It is the Gamadon, the slave mark of ancient Calican lore. I struggle and flail in vain against the 2 soldiers.
Keep him still,
the brander says. He digs the branding iron into the embers, and I watch as the symbol gradually comes alive before my eyes with that orange glint only flames can provide. After what feels like an eternity, the one in charge of branding removes the white-hot metal from the fire. He shuffles behind me. I can feel the heat upon the back of my neck as the brander approaches. The pain is unlike anything I've ever experienced before. I hear the searing sound a second before my skin first itches, then burns, then rips away. I can feel my skin stick to the branding iron as he peels it away from the back of my neck. A blank patch of skin replaced by a mark of shame and bondage.
There.
I can hear a perverse glee in his words.
Now you're a proper prisoner.
I can already feel a blister festering on the back of my neck. It takes every ounce of willpower I have to prevent myself from touching it, because I know it will only make the pain worse. As they force me from the branding room to another chamber filled with newly initiated conscripts getting dressed in conscript livery, my skin starts to itch. "Put it on," a fellow conscript orders, tossing livery to me. I join the procession of a dozen branded men stumbling and fumbling about as they attempt to get dressed in a timely manner. It becomes apparent that the pants I've been given have a broken string meant to serve as a belt. I look around to see if the other conscripts getting dressed are having a similar problem with their pants, but none seem to be. I move backward to see about trading in my pants with the broken belt string, but I'm pushed by a Calican soldier. "Out the door and into the pen," he says. When I don't immediately comply, he screams, "Now, scum!" The building's exit reveals a bustling war camp on the edge of the broken city. I recognize it now. It's Candelaria, not more than a week's ride from Mustang Prairie, right on the border recently smashed through by Calico. So they brought us back to Seneca. Why? Arrayed around the crumbled walls are hundreds of white tents in perfect rows lining a lush countryside. The disparity between the two worlds is arresting. It feels as if we've slithered through a wrinkled, pitch-black hallway of pain, only to be birthed into a mathematical, structured world of order. Yet there are cracks in the foundation as soldiers and conscripts move about in a stream of organized chaos amid the perfectly formed alleys between tents. Our group of conscripts is not allowed to experience the war camp yet. The Calicans usher us toward a circular fence meant to hold horses. Mud cakes between my toes, and I remember the thief. He's still around somewhere. I scan the faces of the poor souls trapped here and recognize that all have received the brand in the same place I did. It is not enough that they steal our families and lands, but the Calicans insist on stripping from us our most fundamental elements, our dignity, our freedom, and in exchange they brand us as a permanent reminder of our woe, as if bearing this ache for Emily and Sarah were not enough grief to suffer. Some men wear their gamadons on the backs of their necks like me, others on the backs of their hands. I wonder idly if there is a distinction before I go back to scanning the crowd for the boot thief. As I search among the pathetic faces, more conscripts pour into the yard. Each addition pushes me toward the fence. Approximately a dozen conscripts stand outside the pen, eyeing us impatiently. These men are different. They wear the same garb we do, but have been given a vest to wear over it. One of them, a rangy fellow wearing a beastly beard and a face full of scars, stares at me from behind an angry, festering gamadon on his right cheek. My gaze withers after only a moment. When a group of Calican soldiers with whips lying casually over their shoulders appears, I realize that my missing boots are the least of my problems. I hear a shrill whistle, followed by the rain of silence. The most rigid Calican soldier I've ever seen steps forward and begins to speak.
There are 208 of you sorry bastards joining this conscript battalion. You will be selected by a kappa and drafted into their groups. From there you will be assigned duties. Failure to complete these duties will result in your execution. Failure to abide by your kappa's commands will result in your execution. If you follow...
What kind of commands will these kappas ask of us?
One of the conscripts on the outer edge of our crowded pen voices his query and instantly feels the lash of one of the Calican soldiers. He goes down, but the lashing soldier gives him an extra few strikes. Whether 5 or 10 I couldn't say, but once the troublemaker curls into a ball and falls into silent sobs, the soldier pulls his last strike before returning to attention. The recoil throughout the sea of conscripts is felt like a wave, and by the time the collective reaction reaches me, the Calican commander continues.
As I was saying, if you hope to leave this camp and this war, you will have to prove your worth. First, to your kappa, he says, and waves his hand toward the conscripts outside of the pen, the ones with the vests. Sweeping his other hand toward the Calican soldiery, he continues, then to your guard lieutenant, then to myself, the guard captain. Prove you deserve to join our great nation, that you deserve to stand in the light of Atli's grace, and you may afford yourself the chance. Death or service to the Republic? You decide. They're all yours, Guard Lieutenant.
The rigid Calican officer walks away just as another steps forward and clears his throat before addressing the assemblage.
All right, you know the deal. Group 1.
A Kappa speaks up.
12 losses.
The guard lieutenant notes it in his journal.
Group 2.
Another of the Kappas steps forward.
17 losses, sir.
This practice goes on as about half a dozen gray-vested Kappas step up one by one to report casualties from some presumed prior conflict, with the lieutenant noting each in his ledger. His level of approval can be gleaned by the sound he makes. A grunt indicates that he's satisfied, whereas an audible growl means he's displeased.
Group 11.
A shrew-faced Kappa with pinched eyebrows and no chin hesitates before answering.
26 losses.
For the first time since starting his count, the man with the journal looks up and scowls.
Oh, it's always you, Peter. You disgusting sack of shit. Next engagement, I'm putting you and yours in the worst position on the front line. Group 12.
14 losses.
And Group 13? 1 loss.
I can't see the speaker from where I stand, but a murmur goes through the assembled Calicans. The lieutenant smiles and shakes his head in disbelief as he puts the last notation in his journal down.
Good work, Levi. A new best for your group. By my count, he starts adding up the figures. We've sustained 216 losses in the last action, so we're going to have a shortage. As always, Kappas, your selection order will be based on merit. That means that Group 13 has first pick. Again. Levi.
A handsome Kappa steps forward. His aquiline features and clear, pale skin are out of place among the sunken, dirty visages of the other men. He has the kind of face women fancy, with high cheekbones and a proud chin. But his eyes frighten me. There is something unnaturally cold about them. He seems to look at the men assembled in front of him and see straight through their very souls. He sweeps past me and out of view, and after a few moments, I hear him say,
This one.
The lieutenant nods and instructs the lead Kappa to take his next pick. Before he does, I see the boot thief leave the enclosure and join the handsome Kappa's side. He's not at all what I expected. The thief. His lengthy black hair slants sideways over his face, and he has an expression that suggests a smile is always around the corner. He must have seen some hardship in his life, as two very large, crooked scars create unnatural canyons between his eyebrow and his cheekbone. My Swansons still dangle from their laces on his shoulder. A primal part of me wants to tackle the man and demand my boots back, but my sanity hasn't left me yet. Sarah always says I have trouble letting go, but I'm not ready to court death over a pair of boots, even if I crafted them myself. Instead, the drafting continues, and I do my best to put the stolen footwear out of my mind. I expected the process to take hours, but after a few minutes, while the Kappa of Group 4 was dawdling, the lieutenant grew impatient and assigned the rest of the conscripts to their groups. Things moved at a quick pace after that, until only 18 men remained. Taking stock of my peers, I realized that the lieutenant very deliberately chose the conscripts he placed in other groups. All that remains for the Kappa of Group 11 are the elderly, the beaten, and the incredibly pathetic, such as me. I know I should take it as an insult, but I can't blame them. I can still feel the dried, crusted blood in my hair from the beating I received during my separation from my family. I don't even have any boots. I must seem like the worst choice. Yet I find hope in the form of Caleb, who stands at my side, unchosen because of his age. The Kappa of Group 11 introduces himself as Peter and leads us toward the massive war camp. The moment I take a step to follow, my pants begin to fall and I adopt a waddle, where I grab at my broken belt with one hand and widen my stance to keep the trousers from falling. We pass soldiers placing clothes on clotheslines and wringing out wet shirts into a small metal tub.
Most of the jobs they have us do around camp are the ones the Calicans don't want to do themselves,
says Peter. We walk through the alleys between the tents and see a group of soldiers huddled around a fire. One pokes it with a stick, keeping it going. A pair of them have a chessboard splayed out in the mud as they arrange the pieces to start a new game.
Since I've been here, they had Group 11 dig graves, shovel shit, carry weapons, dig trenches, and march. They always fucking make us march.
I'm having trouble keeping up, and I try to turn my waddle into a jog. My feet are beginning to ache. We pass a makeshift mess hall where Calican soldiers stand crunched together, waiting for food. They eat from little cups, and some barter their food for other condiments.
They don't feed us much, so if you don't do well with an empty stomach, I suggest you just let the Reavers take you.
Reavers? I thought they were all extinct. A myth used to frighten Senecan children, evil men who could jump through walls and lift a cow overhead with their impossible strength. We were told they would kidnap us if we didn't behave properly and that they'd take us to the graveyard and eat our eyeballs. I'm not paying attention and run into the conscript in front of me. I'm expecting to be pushed by the man, but to my surprise, he's frozen in place. I then realize that this section of the camp has grown quiet. Clink, clink, clink. The sound of spurs. A man with a gray trench coat and coal-black gloves carves his way through the crowd. His uniform bears a near-exact resemblance to that of the horsewoman I saw before my family was taken. Conscripts and soldiers alike part at his approach. His left hand clutches a rifle, while the right holds the reins of a chestnut mare who follows dutifully behind. His presence sucks the life out of everyone he passes, and only when he is a safe distance away does that life bleed back into the crowd. Conversations gradually spark back up. A soldier goes back to handing out missives and yelling names. Before Peter starts back up, I ask, "Who was that? A Reaver?" For the first time since I started following the Kappa, he acknowledges me, but it isn't with a look of comradeship. It's a look of disapproval. He doesn't deign to answer my question.
What happened to your shoes?
I look down and see that standing still has caused my feet to sink into the mud. It takes extra effort to pry them from the muck. After I do, the now wet pants fall even more readily to the ground. I struggle to hold them up. "A man stole them," I answer. Peter shakes his head.
"We might have an extra pair back at the tent."
He starts walking again, and I try to keep up.
"But if not, your best bet is to take a pair from the dead."
The dead? I begin, but he doesn't hear me or doesn't care.
Whatever you do, never take from the dead Calicans. Only take from enemies, got it?
He looks back to me to make sure his point was received, and I nod my head. We walk for 10 more minutes before we reach the back of the war camp. A foul stench overtakes my senses, digging deep into my sinuses.
Welcome
Peter nods ahead to a ragged tent.
to your new home, Group 11.
The large white military tent is triangular, with large wooden poles set vertically at its front, middle, and back, acting as a divider and support for the canvas. A few conscripts stand around 2 large water barrels placed at the corners of the tent. One of them dunks his head in, and an audible gulp can be heard as he quenches his thirst. I risk a look inside and notice a few men sleeping on mats that may have been made of cloth once. A Calican soldier appears from behind our tent, fumbling with his belt. He calls to Peter.
I left you and yours a nice surprise. Be a dear and clean it up.
We'll get right on that.
Peter calls back with a pleasant tone. Then when the soldier is out of earshot, he mutters,
Sister fucker.
One of the conscripts by the water barrel is counting us. When he finishes, he aggressively approaches Peter, saying,
A full group is 25, but we've got just 18. They had a shortage.
Peter digs in.
Did the best I could, Greg. Besides, Hoods has it in for us.
The conscript looks us over more intently. I notice his gamadon isn't on his neck like ours, but on the back of his hand.
Us? He has it out for us? No, he has it out for you, Peter. He has ever since he caught you sneaking rations.
He emphasizes this by pointing at Peter's chest before snapping his gaze back to me.
Look at this. This one has no shoes and a messed up face, and this one,
he points to Caleb.
Well, this poor bastard looks like he'll keel over and die at any moment. What the hell were you thinking when you chose? What choice do you think I had?
Peter clenches his jaw and takes a step toward the dissenter.
I don't like your tone, Greg. Lest you forget, I'm the one in charge, and even if Hoods hates me, he'll let me punish you as I see fit.
Both men are a finger's width from each other and are moments away from coming to blows when the loud concussive beat of drums rings the ears. I expect Peter to speak first, but it's his subordinate that does.
Hear that, Peter? You just got us killed.
The war camp roils like a beast waking from slumber. It stirs with the heartbeat of unceasing drums. The pounding grows louder, and the conscripts all around are heard groaning and stretching out their backs. Calican soldiers near the edges of the conscript area pour out from their tents and begin forming into orderly ranks. Only when the drums become deafening does the haste seem to reach their minds.
Hey, Boots! Don't just stand around! Help them out!
Peter yells at me with his arms crossed. The members of Group 11 grunt as they attempt to pull out a thick coiled chain from within the tent. By the time I arrive to help, they've done most of the work and have already moved on to straightening it out in front of the tent. It seems like the chain will never end, but the uncoiling reveals circular ankle holds welded into the iron every few paces. When I see the Group 11 conscripts maneuvering their feet through the leg cuffs, I know I'm expected to do the same.
Lock your feet in!
Peter calls out to us, but I can't. I need to find some type of footwear. I drift away slightly from the pack to sneak a glance into the open tent, but the shadows from within don't allow me a good enough look. A forceful set of hands grabs me by the shoulder.
What are you doing? Lock in, now!
Says the Kappa. I need shoes, something to cover my feet, I argue. Father Winter is still a few months away, but Brother Autumn has given us rain in abundance, going by how much mud is caked in between my toes.
It's too late for that,
Peter says, and pushes me over the line of men tethered to the chain. He deposits me with the only man who hasn't locked himself in yet, saying, "Greg, he's gonna take your normal position. I want you at the end."
You want me to pay for your shortage?
The man Greg is livid with the Kappa.
I can't move if I have to carry extra weight, and I'm the only chance our group has of surviving this.
Peter goes on the offensive, growling.
Maybe next time you'll hold that tongue of yours.
He points to me.
Get him situated.
The man barely meets my eyes before muttering,
Situate him yourself.
He walks to the end of the chain. Peter grabs me by the front of my shirt and, to my surprise, leads me to the position next to Caleb.
Left foot,
he says, then walks away. I place my foot in the proper position and close the cuffs with a soft click. After a few moments, Peter does a pass and inspects each member of the group to ensure that the cuffs have properly closed. When he's satisfied, he yells,
"All right, let's go to inspection."
"Hey, kid,"
Caleb says to me.
"I never caught your name."
"Nolan," I say.
"Well, Nolan, make peace with the seasons. This is probably it for us."
Where are we going? Why are we being shackled? The conscript in front of me lets out an amused laugh.
So we don't run? Silence! Eyes to the front!
Peter barks, who is walking up and down the line hollering orders and using a muddy stick to whack at the shins of those he deems out of line. Once everyone is standing to his liking, he walks to the head of the column and leads us over to an area located at the northern part of the conscript tents, where the 12 other conscript groups await our arrival. Each conscript stands in a perfect line, locked to his chain. The Kappas remain unchained at the head of the lines. The drums continue their dirge. The inspection turns out to be nothing more than waiting 10 minutes for a Calican overseer to arrive and ensure that we are locked in place. Then we're ordered to another area of the camp.
Let's move!
Peter barks when the other conscript groups begin to outpace us en route to wherever our destination lies. I can't help but note that those groups have fully shackled men on the conscript chain, while our group has clear gaps due to the shortage, meaning some unlucky members on our line, like Greg, must carry the extra weight of the chains. I experiment with keeping my pants from falling without holding them. I waddle with my legs spread in an unnatural way, but learn this doesn't work, so I go back to having one hand set permanently on my breeches. To make my failure worse, I'm forced to do this while dragging the chain attached to my ankle. I learned the best way to handle the weight from watching others more practiced. Each member of Group 11 is spread out approximately 2 fathoms apart, but those that look like they know what they're doing hold their part of the chain in each hand. We cut through the enormous Calican war camp, and I spot a pair of soldiers passing wine back and forth. They laugh and throw some creative curses at us as we pass them. The camp itself is half barren. Many of the soldiers that occupied it before left their tents and gathered on the outskirts of the battlefield. Still, the drums continue. It's almost like they call to us, like we're chasing them. For a brief instant, I convince myself that my heart beats in tandem with their tempo. But the truth is that it beats furiously because I'm afraid. After being robbed of my family, I convinced myself that there was nothing more that could frighten me. What more could the Calicans threaten me with? An image of the hot orange tint of the Gamadon mere moments before they seared it into my skin springs to mind. This is my life now. No more Sarah. No Emily. I shudder as I think back to my daughter's face as I signed to her that I was going to find her. She believed me. Maybe I believed it myself then, but that was before today, before becoming human chattel. There is no escape from this. Just when I feel like I'm getting the hang of marching in my oversized pants, our group emerges from the war camp and I am overcome with awe as I come upon the Calican formations. Hundreds of men stand shoulder to shoulder in 4 columns of roughly 15 men. My eye is drawn to their uniforms. There's a brief instant where I feel like I'm being engulfed by a great blue wave, nipped with tiny white caps in its swell. Such is the effect of the navy jackets tucked into gray trousers that the Calicans sport.
Hold Group 11!
Peter orders. He's led us to a spot among the other conscript groups behind the massive columns. Moments later, the portly guard lieutenant Hoods approaches. He's flanked by a procession of men that hand long, thin objects from a supply carriage to the conscripts at the front of the chain lines. Is it some kind of weapon? Impossible. The Calicans couldn't possibly be that stupid. When a rather large Calican soldier reaches the conscript in front of me, a feeling that I thought would never return flutters in my breast. Hope. It's a rifle. They're handing us rifles. Images of Sarah and Emily dance through my mind once again. Escape. Reunion. I study the posture of the man, hoping to glean something as he hands a rifle to the man before me. After he takes another from the bundle and walks toward me. Hand it to me. Hand me the damn rifle, you fool! To my surprise and delight, he does. Once the rifle is finally in my hands, I immediately realize there's something wrong with it. The bayonet on the end looks blunt, like it's embedded into the wood. It dawns on me that this is no rifle, but a replica meant to look the part. It was carved from wood, down to fake trigger guards and fake hammers on the fake barrel. My eye is drawn to what's supposed to look like a bayonet. It is the color of dry crimson. At first, I am tempted to marvel at the Calican's attention to detail, but then I understand that this has seen action before, and this blunt wood has punctured flesh. A shudder rides through me. The replica presents a unique problem for me. I've been able to get to this point by using one hand to ensure my pants are stationary and the other hand to support the weight of the chain, but this is no longer possible with the addition of the rifle. I adapt by holding both the chain and my pants with the same hand, but soon my shoulder grows weary. I belatedly realize that the drums have stopped their incessant beating and the men have ushered themselves into silence. A senior Calican officer at the head of the column shouts something on horseback, but the distance between us makes it impossible to hear. I struggle to take in the entire scope of the army. Hundreds of men on horseback are arrayed in similar columns to the soldiers skirting the edges of my vision. Why didn't I see them before? The senior officer bellows something I don't catch. Thousands of Calican voices suddenly scream into the air, piercing it with a war chant. The drums start abruptly, and the march begins. We march alongside the Calican army, shadowed not only by Peter, who remains unchained, but also Calican overseers who ensure we keep pace. Someone up there must have thought it funny to send one of the drummer boys to march beside us. The pounding grates on me and I flinch with each beat. The boy can't be more than 15 years old. It disgusts me that they'd involved children in their war, but I shouldn't be shocked. After all, they took mine from me.
Faster!
The fat soldier who handed out our weapons yells when the slamming of the drummer boy's instrument picks up speed, and we're forced to adopt a soft jog. I try to let my thoughts fade and focus on the run, but my mind won't allow it. There's tension in the back of my neck, and my grip on the chain is throbbing. It's as if I were in a waking fever dream full of hallucinations where all my senses are burdened.
You're bleeding, lad,
calls Caleb from behind. I look down and see that every step I take leaves an imperfect scarlet imprint of my foot on the mud.
Take your mind off the pain, give yourself a task, and you'll make it through.
Caleb is silent for a moment, thinking.
I know. Start counting your steps.
I try my best to heed Caleb's advice, but my mind is prone to wandering when the count gets high enough. Concentrate, Nolan. At 50 steps, the man in front of me starts to cough. What would happen if he collapsed? Would they execute him? How would they free him from the shackles? Does Peter have a key? Maybe I could swipe it and escape. Stop it. Focus on counting. At 568 steps, my left foot catches on an exposed root, but luckily I catch myself from falling fully. Peter rushes over to my side to scream at me for slowing the pace. I ignore him. Where was I? At 2,558 steps, we climb a hill, separating momentarily from the baggage train as it takes a longer route. By the time we catch back up to the baggage train, the searing pain in my feet starts to worry me. My mind conjures images of a festering open wound being continually rubbed in the mud we trudge through.
You all right, Nolan?
Caleb calls from behind.
2,563 steps.
I holler back in response, pain evident in my tone.
That can't be right. I'm at 3,233.
He calls back, keeping the banter alive.
You two shut your mouths!
Yells Peter, who jogs past us, ruining the distraction. We're well past 8,000 steps when we come upon a road that cuts through a forest. The entire way we've had the sounds of drums to guide us, but here those noises give way to a more nerve-wracking sound, one that dictates life and death. Gunfire. The staccato barks echo through the forest like an angry song of some unseen bird. The advanced guard must already be in action, the fat Calican says to his companion. At this, I expect them to order us to halt and form back into the perfectly aligned ranks. But instead, these madmen hurry us toward the sounds and force us to march even faster, so that the conscripts are almost running. The farther down the road we get, the clearer the music of war becomes. The earth groans beneath my bloodied feet, and the thunder of cannon fire is so loud that there's a moment I look to the sky and wonder if it's real or man-made. I've been so focused on counting my steps that I belatedly realize that the soldiers' columns that had started the march in front of us are now mostly behind us. Some stand off to the sides of the forest road, loading their weapons and readying themselves for war. Few, if any, pay us any mind. At the head of the army is a group of men on horseback. Each wears a metal helmet with some type of scrap metal face covering hanging from it. Wouldn't be quite right to call the covering a mask. Rather, it's a sheet with two small slits that make for barely enough room for the eyes to see through. The Calican who first briefed us at the draft barks a command for us to stop in place. Once we've complied, he steps up and salutes the group of men.
Guard Lieutenant Emmanuel Hoods of the 32nd Conscript Battalion reporting for duty. What are your orders, sir?
A voice made inhuman by the face covering acknowledges the lieutenant.
Get them to the front, Hoods. The advance guard needs a shield to sell this ruse. We'll engage when the fish bites.
The lieutenant salutes in response, turns, and relays the order to the entire conscript battalion. As I pass the officers on horses, I recognize that my assessment was incorrect. Not all of them are wearing the face coverings. One stands apart. He bears his face for all to see and seems openly bored with waiting. His gray duster jacket splits to either side of his horse, and his black gloves blend into his black horse. I am unable to linger long enough to get a better look at him before we emerge from the forest and my senses are overcome with the madness of war. We find ourselves at the edge of the bramble, standing atop a hillock. Below us, chaos. The battle appears to be taking place on what once was green pastoral fields, divided only by the road we followed into oblivion. However, these fields are no longer green, but are alternating swaths of brown mud swales and charred remains of vegetation. Great craters scar the landscape, collecting pools of rainwater littered with the bloated corpses of both man and beast. Once mighty poplars, oaks, and walnut trees along the road are now broken splinters and burned stumps. A thick, unnerving mist hangs over the field, calling to mind the foreboding churchyard back in Mustang Prairie on one of Mother Spring's chilly mornings. My eyes naturally flick to the Calican standards adorned with the Gamadon, hanging limp in the still air. They are held among many hundreds of men standing shoulder to shoulder, with their weapons pointed at a fog so thick that I can't see the other side of the battlefield. Every so often, the flickers of cannon and artillery light up the crowd of men, followed a moment later by a dull boom. I blink and try to shake the cobwebs loose. Another gun goes off. The Calican artillery position is located behind the columns of the advance guard, but the Calican's cannons aren't the only firing. The Senecans, my countrymen, must also have cannons firing from across the foggy battlefield. Most miss their marks, but even from afar and despite the fog, every now and then an explosion appears among the Calican lines, and men are flung like ragdolls to their violent deaths. Hoods screams to our group.
Group 11 to the front!
No one stands up to the lieutenant. No one argues and says it's a bad idea to send untrained and unarmed conscripts to the front line. Instead, the column of men I'm tethered to makes its way into the heart of the battle. It's like they are immune to fear, and I have no choice but to swallow mine.
You heard the guard, Lieutenant! Get to the front!
Peter hollers. I can hear him, but I can't see him. It sounds like his voice is coming from behind us. I am overwhelmed with the belief that everyone converging on this battlefield is destined to perish. That each time a cannonball or bullet is discharged, it will find its mark, and one or more of the men around me will fall. There's no point in fighting, and so I do not fight. I think back to the stories of Senecan bravery that my father and grandfather used to tell. Bold words from men who never in their lives saw war. But as Peter leads us through the ranks of Calican soldiers toward the front of the battle, as I see men loading weapons and officers drawing their swords and galloping their horses this way and that, I'm all but overcome with terror. Chained to a line of prisoners. I have no choice. Group 11 is to be placed in front of the first row of soldiers. This will be our doom. As I step over a conscripted man's corpse that is missing an arm, a dark realization dawns on me. They mean for us to be a type of shield to save the lives of their citizen soldiery at the front. That's what the officer meant in the forest when he said that the advance guard needed a shield. That shield is us. A man on horseback pacing back and forth behind the column yells,
"Hold the line, advance guard!"
Senecan and Calican cannons increase their rates of fire until the resulting near-constant earthquake makes it difficult to discern from which direction the projectiles originate. As our conscript group passes one of these massive guns, I fixate on its wheels and how each time it's fired, it's forced a cart's length backward in the mud. It takes 2 whole men just to march it back into position, where it is reloaded and prepared for the next barrage. Peter's voice is somehow audible over the din as we reach the front of the column. It's as though the Calicans at the front are fighting against the fog itself, shooting into the inky smoke with abandon. Worse still, the enemy they fight are my brethren. Men who would come into my shop for a fitting. Men I'd liked to fight alongside against these Calican dogs.
Group 11, form ranks!
Once again, momentum propels me forward when every fiber of my being is telling me to flee. A cannonball whistles above my head before slamming into the ground at the back of the column. The projectile hops like a rabbit between Calican ranks, taking the leg of a soldier here, the arm of another there.
Get in position, you worthless scum!
A Calican in the row shouts.
Do your damned jobs!
I trudge forward until one of the soldiers grabs me harshly by the back of my shirt, holding me in place.
You stop here when the...
I don't catch what he says because a bullet takes him through the face, splitting his mouth open like a rotten pumpkin. The row of Calicans we are supposed to be shielding respond immediately, firing volley after volley into the mist. Some use our shoulders to steady their weapons, while others simply fire their repeating rifles inches from the back of our heads, adding to the maelstrom of chaos. When one of the older conscripts on the chain gang sees this, he panics and drops to the ground. But the soldier directly behind him opens fire point blank into his back.
Stand, you bastards! The soldier yells. Your miserable lives depend on it.
The smoke from the battle has now grown so thick that it obscures the sun, which is now veiled in a gray shroud, and my mind, so disturbed by the sight, worries that it will be permanent. How long will I remain a spectator? Another cannonball explodes mid-air, sending numerous splinters of hot metal into our number and tearing off the head of a conscript farther down our line. I instinctually glance to the end of our line, expecting to see Peter telling us to remain firm, but he is nowhere to be found. Instead, I see that roughly half our number has been felled. Yet by some miracle, Caleb is still standing. His gaze meets mine, and we share a moment of true terror. A bullet whizzes past my arm and takes some of the thin shirt with it, a reminder that survival here is a matter of random chance.
Conscripts, ready your bayonets!
A loud voice pierces through the thunder.
Prepare a charge!
The Calican behind me nudges my back, and a quick glance left and right shows me that the surviving conscripts have their fake rifles held up as though they were preparing for a brave charge to stab to death the entire Senecan army with blunted wooden toys. Barely believing the insanity of the moment, I follow suit. The cannon fire suddenly stops. At once, half the sound dominating the air ceases. What's going on? My back feels like a weight has lifted off it. I turn and notice the entire advance guard has backed up 30 paces, creating distance between us and them. There's confusion among our group. Are they leaving us? No, they're standing with their rifles pointed toward the enemy. They're using us as decoys to bait the enemy into attacking. As the acrid smoke from various fires crawls toward us over the battlefield, the air becomes suffocatingly hot, like being in an oven. It reminds me of the thunderheads that we'd see upon the horizon during the middle of summer. The kind Sister Summer would send to spit lightning and quake the earth with to signal their arrival. Then, tendrils of smoke appear to turn crimson. In my hallucinatory state, I think for a moment that the blood of all the dead has mixed into the air, giving the smoke that unnatural color. But to my horror, the cloud births forth not corpses but Senecans, dozens of them in uniforms of scarlet and white. With a mighty cry, they rush through the breach of smoke and charge us, their bayonets fixed on our hearts and their muzzles laughing fire into our midst. I fear to even extend an arm, as it will surely mean losing it. But I muster the courage to prepare for their charge with my wooden rifle defensively held in front of me. Doing so causes my pants to fall, and I grab at them in panic. This momentary lapse in concentration is enough for 3 Senecan soldiers to reach within striking distance of the foremost conscripts. But before they can make contact, the Calicans situated 30 paces behind us open fire. I watch helplessly as both Senecans and conscripts fall like harvest wheat to the reaper's scythe. Another cannonball whistles past my shoulder and shears off both of an approaching Senecan's legs. The Calicans now open their cannon fire directly at the advancing Senecan units, with no regard for the conscripts that stand among their target. Instinctually, I fall to the ground and cover my head. After a moment, a soft sound somehow pierces through all the harsh ones.
Save me!
A ragged voice calls out. A Senecan crawls toward me. He is missing both his legs. His dark skin has gone ashen and pale. Shuddering, I try to crawl away from the man, but find the chain on my ankle pulled taut. I cannot move away. Violent hands throw me to the ground, and I'm mounted by one of the 3 Senecan soldiers that charged us earlier. Somehow he survived. He lost his 2-cornered hat in the frenzy, revealing locks of dark, curly hair like many in my village and the surrounding towns are known to have. His hands find my throat, and I feel my windpipe constrict. I grab at his hands and try desperately to pull him off of me. When that doesn't work, I search for a rock, a piece of shrapnel, anything that could be my salvation. Nothing. The world fades from my vision, and our eyes meet. He's young, barely out of his teenage years. His eyes are wild, but in any other moment, I bet they would look kind. I wonder if he has ever heard of Mustang Prairie. In another life, I could have sold him a pair of work boots. The look we share is profound. I'm you. I want to shout, I'm one of your countrymen. But he has seen his friends die today. There is no room in his heart for kindness anymore. His grip tightens, my throat clicks, and my eyes roll back. It's odd what the mind seems to notice when approaching death. I can't seem to stop staring at his golden tasseled epaulets that hang from each shoulder. Each time he moves forward to create leverage to take my life, he grunts and the epaulets jiggle like a wind chime in a storm. As my consciousness slips away, there's a certain part of me that rages against the blackness. Thoughts of Emily and Sarah penetrate my mind and make me feel as though I've lost them all over again. My daughter, that's what I want my last thought to be as I leave this place. Why can't I picture her face? No! I scream inside. You cannot take that from me too. There's a ringing in my ears that grows louder as my vision narrows. Soon that ringing regains order and swells to a heartbeat that pounds in my ears. Ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. But the sound doesn't fade, even when I've drifted to the darkness. My last breath in life is my first in death, and it stings something fierce. The air has a bitter taste, and the apex of the reddish hallucinatory sky drifts toward the void of what looks to be an endless desert. It becomes impossible to know where the horizon begins or ends. The sound of the howling wind is unbearable, and I want to cover my ears, but I have no hands, no arms. I let loose a shriek, but then I have no mouth, it seems. What is this place? I sense other beings around me, but they are formless shadows drifting at the periphery of my vision. They speak, or I hear voices whispering in some unknown tongue at least. Tiny pairs of rubies glow in the middle distance as the hot wind kicks up sand and dirt. The whispering grows louder, as if thousands of voices have taken up the liturgy. I try to look down at my body, but I cannot move. Ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. As my legs begin to form, I see the relatively clear outline of a figure perched on a rock like a cat. 2 crimson eyes glow at the center of a jet black mass, but my sight blurs as soon as I make eye contact with it. The ringing in my ears grows louder. It's an odd humming sound, not unlike that of a beetle in flight. The sound bloats until it arrives at a distinct, deafening point, which causes my eardrums to burst. The buzzing suddenly ceases and is replaced with a peaceful alternative. Almost like I'm being plunged in water, I feel safe, submerged like this, calm. I worry that returning to the surface of this non-water will drown me. What is this? I sense death, but not like the death overhanging the battlefield moments before. It's not good or evil, just old, ancient, timeless even. I don't want to leave it, but I know intrinsically that I must. I must swim to the surface, only to drown, to die again. It's the only way I can get back. Why do I want to get back? I grasp for something, anything, a tether to my life, a face. I was trying to remember a face, but whose? I'm nearer to the surface now. My mind is coming back to me. I think I remember how to breathe, but not here, not now. A girl, that's who I was trying to remember. Who is she? Brown strands of her hair flow past me, a memory. She smiles wide, but she can't giggle. She's deaf. I learned how to use hand words for this girl. She's my daughter. That's it. The realization is as comforting and warm as a down blanket. What is her name? Emily. I think her name. Hold it close to me, and the blackness melts away. After I take a sharp intake of breath, life flows through me. My eyes pop open suddenly. All I see is flushed with crimson for a moment, but it fades as my eyes remember how to focus. The formlessness resolves into a grisly image. That of the Senecan that choked me, now dead. His eyes are fixed upon a point behind me, and his mouth lies agape with one of the wooden replica rifles stuck clean through his soft palate. Flies have already found his face. Startled, I back away, and the chain around my ankle pulls taut, preventing me from moving much at all. Around me are the remnants of a death storm. Red-coated bodies litter the battlefield, and there's a patch of grass that has been lit aflame. The black smoke that rises from it fuses with the gray mists and envelops me and the corpses around me. All is bleak and dead, until I register some movement to my left. It's Caleb. Thank Brother Autumn he survived as well.
I watched you die,
Caleb says, staring at me in disbelief. I return his expression with one of my own before shaking my head. No, not dead. It was dark and hot. I think I was dreaming. I point to the Senecan with the wooden replica rifle through his face. Or work. He doesn't nod, but moves his head slightly upward in a way to acknowledge that it was. That's 2 times Caleb has saved my life. I owe this man everything, and I've known him less than a day. We're laid up in a small crater deep enough to submerge a pair of boots. Water and blood pool here. The thunderbolts of cannon fire are relentless, but so too are the Senecans. Another wave is birthed from the fog of war, and once again, with their bayonets raised, they charge straight toward us. There are hundreds of them, and it seems at first that Caleb and I are all alone on this battlefield when the supporting gunfire of the Calicans ceases, but the silence is only momentary. The stillness is shattered by snorts and grunts and stampeding hooves. Calican cavalrymen in cobalt uniforms and iron breastplates atop impressive destriers charge toward the Senecans with their sabers drawn. Each dons the scrap metal masks that I spied earlier in the day. As Caleb and I try to flee out of the way, we find ourselves caught by the free chains that bind us. "The dead," I say, pointing at the conscripts that lay on the chain line. "They're weighing us down!" Caleb says something in response, but I cannot hear. It's as though my body knows of the incoming onslaught and moves in anticipation. "Caleb, get down!" I shout, diving to tackle him. Luckily, the chains aren't pulled so tight that I'm unable to reach him. As I push him out of the way, I fall to the ground, and all I can do is shut my eyes and listen as the cavalry charge tramples over and past us. Only when I hear the cries of death from the crimson-coated Senecans do I dare open them again. When I fell to the ground, I fell on the chest of a dead conscript in our group, one of the men who had been chosen with me in the pen. His face is caved in, with the perfect imprint of a hoof. "We need to get out of here," I shout over the din of battle. Caleb nods in agreement, and the two of us begin the arduous process of dragging the bodies of the fallen to escape the shallow bomb crater. The cavalry charge provided a certain lull in the battle near our tiny pond of blood and muck. I take a moment to catch my breath. To our right, the Calican cavalry loops back around for another charge. The two of us duck again as the horses gallop past, moving so fast that the air they create momentarily dissipates the smoke, giving me a clearer indication of the scale of this battle. For season's sake, this is madness! Clumps of bodies, Senecan, Calican, and conscript alike, dot the battlefield covered in mud and blood. Columns of Calican infantry trudge forward, emboldened by the success of their cavalry. There are thousands of them, at least. But it's not the sheer amount of manpower on the battlefield that gives me pause. It's the sight of a singular conscript group that seems to be beating back a squadron of Senecans by themselves. Where most conscripts stand in line, accepting their fates and praying to their gods for salvation, this group fights like a military unit, and I find myself watching with rapt attention despite the insanity around me. There's a beauty in the contrast of the largest man and the skinniest man I've ever seen fighting back to back, fending off the red-clad Senecans. Together they lure a group of enemy soldiers to their position, only to throw their chains at the soldiers' legs. These wrap around their enemies like metal vines, tripping them and pulling them into the muck. Once down, the conscripts pounce and stab the soldiers with their wooden replicas. For good measure, the giant man turns the replica rifle in his hands and rains down blows that splatter a Senecan's skull. The efficiency in which they perform this routine speaks to a degree of skill and organization I wouldn't have thought possible among the conscripts. Is this how conscript groups are meant to function? I wonder how many of their group have fallen, but before I have a chance to fully inspect them, Caleb shouts,
"Look! The Senecans retreat!"
And so they do. I am able to see thousands of my countrymen fleeing as the Calicans give chase across the battlefield before the window that the cavalry charge created in the smoke closes shut. I fall to the ground, exhausted by the sheer physicality of battle, and look up to Caleb, who has stood back up. "I owe you again, Caleb. If you hadn't run him through with your rifle, I'd be dead." I point to the Senecan who tried to choke me to death. He shakes his head and almost looks afraid of me.
"You were stone dead, Nolan."
"No, I just passed out. I told you I was dreaming. You don't dream if you're dead." I look up at Caleb and extend a hand, insisting that he accept my gratitude, and when he sees that I won't withdraw it, he shakes it. He's about to say something to me, and then he glances behind us with a sneer. I follow his gaze and take in the sheer number of conscripts in Group 11 that have perished here. Most lie dead, their bodies frozen in unnatural positions. "So much death," I muse. Caleb simply grunts. I worry that I should look like I'm mourning them, but instead I feel joy at being alive. It's perverse, and guilt washes over me.
"Come on, lad. We need to get the other survivor."
He's cut off mid-sentence as Guard Lieutenant Hoods appears with his retinue in tow.
"You there! Where's your group's kappa?"
Both of us shake our heads and he seems dissatisfied. He points at both of us simultaneously with his pointer and middle fingers and says,
"Unlock them."
One of the men in his retinue approaches our ankles with a key. Hood's gaze features on me.
"Find your kappa. Alive or dead, I don't care. Just find him."
Caleb and I search in silence for the better part of 10 minutes before he voices his frustration.
Forget Peter. Let's just help the others with the bodies.
We walk over to where the few remaining members of Group 11 sort through the bodies of the fallen. When I reach the tangled mass of Senecan and conscript corpses, I'm taken aback by what I see. Greg, the conscript who got into it with Peter before we marched into battle, lies splayed on top of a pair of Senecans. Did he kill them with his bare hands? I don't see his weapons anywhere. Greg's body twitches. Still alive then? I rush to him. I try to pull the man up, but the weight proves to be a substantial burden. "Help me with him, Caleb," I say. We pull Greg up and confirm that he is as dead as a doornail. But cowering underneath Greg's corpse is our very much alive Kappa, Peter. The wretch shakes like a newborn lamb beneath the bodies of 2 dead Senecans. To his credit, upon seeing us, he hops to his feet and acts like nothing is wrong, like we didn't just find him waiting out the battle underneath some corpses.
"Good. The 2 of you survived."
He looks toward me.
"Now you'll have your pick of the boots, but you'll have to help with the bodies first."
He gestures toward the dead conscripts we still haven't had a chance to sort.
"I'm sure you can find yourself a nice pair."
He stalks off, assuming his role of Kappa and walking with the confidence of someone who has figured out how to beat the system. I turn to Caleb and the 2 of us share a look before I say,
"We've got to get out of this group."